In the previous video, we created this using Photoshop. So we created the design in Photoshop, including the lettering and the images as well. The only difference is the button here was added in as a separate object, which you'll need to do anyway. And what we then decided to do was we made it objects there, instruction page, and we've got this one here. Now this isn't the best way to do it. It is a way, it is a method, it's quick, it is easy, but there is a better or slightly better method in order to make your instruction page come to life a little bit more. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to be consistent and I'm going to use the same type of design that I did before. I'm going to leave the heading in instructions, but you can see I've got rid of the rest of the instructions here. Now what I'm going to do is just export this as a PNG, and I'm just going to save it onto my desktop again, and I'm going to call this instructions L2. Okay, just so that I know what it is, and I've now saved it. Now please, obviously when you're doing this, do not save it to your desktop. Make sure you are saving it into a folder that you know where it's saved at, and something that you can access fairly easily. I'm just doing it here to my desktop just out of ease. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is in the sprites, you can see I've got level 1 instructions. We're going to just create a new group, and done that, create group, and we're going to call it level 2 instructions. Okay, and what I'm going to do is import that image just by, it's on my desktop there, so I'm going to click, drag, and then just drop it in here. And what you'll notice then is it's put it in here for me, which is lovely. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, so I'm going to close that now because I'm not going to do anything more with it, and I'm going to open my rooms, and you can see I've got room 0 instructions. We're going to create a new room, so right click on the rooms, create, and go down to room, and we're going to call this room 1 instructions. Now it might be a little bit confusing because I call this instructions L2. It's just a name I've given to it because I started my room in at 0 and I got 0, 1 and 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is on my instructions we're going to set a background, a sprite. So all I've done is I've clicked on the background layer, clicked on Sprite, and we're going to look into that Sprite folder that we've just made, and here we have it there. Now just for consistency, if I open the instructions to the first room, you can see there we've got that, and if we open the instructions here, it's the same background. The only difference is this room here has all the text on there, whereas obviously this one doesn't. Now what we are going to need to do is, on this one, we want GameMaker to make the instructions for us. Okay, so in order to do this, we need an object. So I'm going to right click on my, inside my objects, I've already made a new folder called instructions pages. So I'm going to make a new object, and I'm going to call it O level 2 inst, so for instructions. And what we are then going to do is we don't need to give it a sprite, but we will need to add it to the room. So I'm just going to go in here, and again I've called it level 2 just for simplicity here. Let me just call it level 1 so that nobody gets confused, because the room is called 1, the object will be called 1. So let me click on the instances object and drag it in. It doesn't matter where we put it because we're going to use code to define where it goes. So we've added that in, and what we're going to do is double click it, and we are going to add an event, and it's going to be a draw event and a draw GUI. Now with this in mind, what we need to do is on the side here, we need to look for the text value here. Now this is quite easy to do, and as you can see, what we can do when we have a text value is we can literally just put in here what it is we want them to know. So earlier I wrote up a list of instructions, so all I'm going to do is make sure they're inside the text point here. Now I'm going to forcibly go on to instructions 1 because I'm going to show you what's going to happen when we load this instructions up. So let's click on play. And you can see it's basically put the text right at the top here. There's no formatting, nothing at all, but it's put it up here. So what we need to do is move it down so it starts about here. So the first thing we need to do is think, what coordinates do we need to use? Well, if we go back to the room here, and if I hover my mouse around about here, I can see there's coordinates in the bottom corner. So if I put them at starting at, say, we'll start at 100 and 190. So let me close that for a second, and then let's just go back to the object. So let's start it there at 100 and 190, and let's just see now what that's done. And there you are, you can see now it's moved it straight away. Now you can see it's in some sort of default font, so let's go and sort that out first. Let's go on the top here, and you can see I've got a fonts folder. Let's make a new font, and we're going to call it font instruction. And we're going to set the font. It doesn't really matter which one you go for, providing you it's easy to read. So I'm just going to choose this font because I like it, Baba's New, and I'm going to make sure it's reasonably big, so it's 20. Okay, so I may need to come back here later and change it. Let's close that. That's saved. And then what we do is GameMaker works in orders, so we are going to drag in the set font, which is here, and we're going to set it to font instructions. I know it was white earlier, but I'm going to make sure it's always going to be set to white by dragging this in, and let's just see now what that's going to do. Okay, lovely. So you can see now the font now is a little bit bigger, and it's well presented here. Let's go a little bit larger. So instead of 20, let's go up, and you can see as I alter the font here, it'll have then a direct correlation, because I'm altering the font here, it'll have a direct correlation, and as soon as I load the program up, it'll update. Lovely. Now you'll notice this has gone off the side here, right? So there's no what's called text wrapping, but there are a few tricks that we can use. Now we are going to use what's called escape characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to roughly where this is going to sort of end, and we're going to put an escape character in. Okay, so this is a little bit fiddly because we've got a text box here. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to just go there a little bit more, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here just so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put what's called an escape character in. Now an escape character is one that will not be displayed, but it will do something. So you can see now I've put \n in here. So if I put play, let's have a look, see what this says. And what you'll notice, look, it's put that onto another line. Now, it's a way and a method, instead of us having to use multiple boxes, it's a way for us to get everything in order for us. And we can keep everything there in one value. So if we wanted to change the fonts or the colors, we're only applying it then to one draw value box instead of trying to put it at like 2 or 3 boxes. Okay, so that's quite nice. And as you can see, as I add a couple more \n's in, it'll just throw them down here as we go. Now, what we also need to do is get some images in as well. So I'm going to go back to my room, not that one, my instructions room, and you can kind of see now the text doesn't show up. But what I'm going to do is I want to get my characters in here. Now I want them to be moving, right? So where you've got your instructions, I'm going to go into my sprites, because obviously I don't want the objects going in, I just want the sprites. And what I'm going to do is just click, drag and drop. Now you'll notice it's come up with a big cross. Now that means that there's going to be a little warning which is going to come up to say I'm not putting it on the correct layer, like so. So it's basically saying, look, you're not putting an object onto your instances layer, you're actually trying to put an asset, and an asset's not going to work. Do you want to create an asset layer? Click on create, and as if by magic, it's created an assets layer for us. Okay, now I'm going to rename this, instead of assets 1, because that's not a good name, we're going to put this and call it images. And what we're also going to do is we're going to then put the next part of the instructions in, which says you'll need to head to the portal. Now, whilst I'm there, I may as well put a picture of the portal in. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the, not that one, we're going to go back to the workspace, and we're going to put the next instruction in. Okay, now in order for me to put the next instruction in, I just need to go to the end of the sentence. I'm going to put a few \ends in, and then I'm just going to put the next part in. Okay, now one thing to bear in mind, you'll notice my font here that I've chosen, I've used characters. Right, now the characters that I used were speech marks, and this font doesn't support speech marks. So if you find something like this has happened, you either change the font or you change the way you've typed something. Now either way, this is quite nice because you've got GameMaker creating this text for you, and you do have a little bit more control over it. So let's say, for example, we think, oh no, there aren't only 3, there's actually 4 enemies. Well, all you need to do is you just basically edit the text that's here. So you can then read it like it's got here, plain as day, and then where it's got there are only 3, we could change that and say 4. And likewise, if you decide you wanted to move the text down a little bit more, well, change that to 200 or whatever you need to, and you can move the text down. You've got much more control over it. Okay, now you'll still need to add in a button. So to do this, I've already got my button here, which is called level 0 inst button. So I'm just going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this level 1 button, and double click it. We're going to use a left press, and then we are going to change this. So instead of being room 0, it's going to go to room 1. And then all I'm going to do is go into the room 1 instructions and just drag this on. Now bear in mind where I'm putting it. You can see as I drag it on, it's coming up with this red exclamation mark because it thinks I'm trying to put it on this assets layer. Right, if I just click in instances, we'll throw that on here. And now all of a sudden we have some text on there, and we have the button there as well. And you'll notice these now are animated, right? Because it's pulling in the assets, it's animated. Now, as I said to you earlier, the text here will not display because we've got funny characters. And if that's the case, fine, let's change the font. And this is the power of this. So if I double click on the font instructions and we say, right, instead of going to Babas New, we're going to go to a completely different font. Let's say, for example, Helvetica New, and we probably don't need it as big, so let's go down to 26 or 25, and let's just see now what that does. So you're able to edit things very, very quickly without worrying at all. Okay, now you'll notice this doesn't have the same characters that we need as well. So what you'll need to do is just obviously make sure that the characters are there that you want to use, and if they're not, obviously don't use that font. One thing that you will find is the mainstream fonts, like your Arial, your Times New Roman, they will typically have everything in there that you're going to need. So if we go back to Arial as an example, this will probably have everything that we need on there. Okay, now the last thing that I'm just going to show you on this is if you wanted to get the text to come in a character at a time. Okay, so when we play our game, what you may find is obviously the text comes in. You might want it to come in as a character at a time, so you don't want it all to come in as once like it has here. So if you did want to do that, have a look at the next video, because then we can have a look and we'll make some modifications to see how we can do that.